After 30 rounds of racing, it all comes down to this. The series is headed to Las Vegas for the final stop of the playoffs. In the 250 class, we know Hayden Deegan is going to be out for blood. And speaking of blood, in the 450 class, we could have a little bit of family feud action going. The Lawrence brothers are going into this final round with a winner-take-all situation. There's a lot to talk about and not a lot of time to do it. Our race day update show starts now. All right, what is up, everybody? We're doing our race day update show a little bit different this week. Anyways, starting things off like we always do, we're going to get into the injury updates. So unfortunately, last week, Austin Faulkner did go down. He banged up his knee. Sounds like he just dabbed his foot. No exact updates on exactly what kind of injury he suffered specifically to his knee, but unfortunately, Austin will not be competing this weekend. Really hate to see that for Austin because he was almost through a full season healthy. He would have been one of only 5 guys who was able to compete in all the races throughout both classes combined, which would have been great for him as he heads into the offseason. And I still am excited, but it would have been even more exciting to see how he could do coming out in supercross if he was able to stay healthy throughout this whole season. Nonetheless, Austin Faulkner will not be competing this weekend. We'll talk a little bit more about him as we get into the points. And then in better news, Cameron McAdoo is back on the bike. So that's really good to see. He was able to ride for the first time since tearing his ACL. He's obviously not competing in the playoffs, but nonetheless, he is back on the bike. Then Max Volan is also going to be out. He did dislocate his elbow, so unfortunately, he will not be able to finish off the series. And then we still have the same guys that have been out the whole series so far. Julian Beaumer, Mikkel Harep, Chance Hymas, Michael Moseman, and Jalik Swoll are all still out with their respective injuries. As far as the 450 class, at the time of this recording, it's not quite clear exactly what Malcolm Stewart's going to do. We're pretty sure he's going to give it another go. Looking at his Instagram post from last week here, to quote him, he said, "After giving it another attempt, it's clear that we're not quite ready. At this level, you need to be 100%, and I'm not there yet. We made the decision not to line up tonight. Thank you guys for the support and understanding. Now excuse me while I go find the world's biggest ice pack." So obviously he's dealing with some things there. We know that he banged up his leg as well as his back when he came up short at the opening round of the playoffs. So expect him to give it a go in practice, but we're really not sure what's going to happen after that. As far as Dean Wilson, he did go down and bang up his knee, and he was only able to manage a couple of points. So right now he's actually all the way back in, I believe, 23rd in the points, 1 point behind Jorge Prado. So he's not quite even into the payout positions in the championship, even though he's made it into the main events so far. So he's definitely coming out here swinging, trying to get into the top 22 in the points. Should not be a problem as long as he can get through the wild card race. But nonetheless, he's banged up. He's going to give it a go. His knee is definitely hurting. So say a prayer for Dino. Then, of course, we still have both of the Kawasaki riders, Jorge Prado and Jason Anderson. They're both out with whatever you want to call what they have going on. Colt Nichols is dealing with his thumb injury. And, of course, Aaron Plessinger has his illness that he's dealing with. Now, jumping over to our 250 class riders and storylines. At the top this week with 92 points, we have Joe Shimoda. So shout out to Joe Shimoda. What a wild ride he had last weekend. We came out that he was sick coming into the weekend. The expectations were not very high. He's been the second best guy for a lot of the season, but with how great Hayden's been and the fact that Joe's now sick, it just really didn't look that great for Joe. But he didn't let that stop him. He went out there, he did his thing. He went 2-2 in the motos, which ended up giving him the overall win and handed him a 10-point lead as Hayden Deegan got caught up in some drama. And speaking of that drama, Hayden Deegan, right here you could see Levi Kitchen gets into him at the opening lap of the second main event after Hayden had a pretty dominant win in the first race. And, well, things just kind of went sideways from there. It was pretty gnarly. I was not expecting that. I would love to hear a little bit more of what Levi was thinking at that time. We've heard Levi talk briefly about it, but nothing too conclusive. So with that being said, there's a lot on the line this weekend for Hayden. He is the only person to ever win an SMX title as far as in this 250 class. So you know he's going to want to come out here and repeat that. He looked really good last weekend. Even after that crash and not having a front brake lever, he was still very fast, came up through the field, and almost caught back up to Levi. So I would not count him out, and I would count on him trying to do something not only to Levi, but also to Joe, because with the way that the points are right now, with Hayden being 10 points behind, he has to win, and Joe would have to get at least third place. Or if something really dramatic happens and Hayden gets second, Joe would actually have to finish all the way back in fourth. So he definitely has his work cut out for him. I don't think winning is going to be the issue, but I do expect him to look to challenge Joe a little bit more than usual, because he can't just ride past him and just let him get second. So that's going to be quite the challenge for Hayden. We need a Hayden cam, we need a Levi cam, and we need a Joe cam. Let's just keep a camera on all three of those guys all weekend long. Should be a lot of fun. Third in the championship is where we find Seth Hamaker, and he is actually 14 points behind Joe Shimoda. So for him to actually win the championship, he would have to obviously go out there and win, and then Hayden would need to come in second and Joe would need to come in third, which is doable. But so far he's finished in second both rounds, which is still really solid. But he's yet to get the overall win, which is definitely going to be tough. But with Joe being potentially targeted by Hayden and that whole drama, it's quite possible that those two could get either locked up or too focused on each other, and Seth could come in here and win the whole thing. So that would be quite the redemption story from his Supercross season. Anyways, the next closest guy is going to be Tom Vial. He's right here in fourth in the points. So last weekend he ended up only bringing home a fifth place overall, even though he did win the second moto. We're not sure exactly what happened in the first moto, but he did report that he was having some fork issues. Definitely unfortunate to see that, because he probably would be a lot higher up right now in the championship, and he probably would have been on the podium overall last weekend had he not dealt with those things. He's 25 points down right now, so realistically he's pretty much out of the championship, at least from an overall standpoint, but he still put himself in quite a good position as far as overall purse money. Then fifth in the championship, only 3 points behind Tom Vial, is where we pick up Nate Thrasher. So he's actually quietly been doing pretty solid. He didn't have anything amazing happen at the opening round, but he did manage a third overall last weekend. So quietly coming around, he's definitely a lot better at Supercross. But what we know about Nate Thrasher is that he'll come out and win one week and then disappear the next. Hopefully he can stay consistent for at least one more round and bring home a nice paycheck. The next closest guy to Nate Thrasher is going to be Levi Kitchen. So right now, Levi is gaining a lot of fans, losing a lot of fans. There's a lot of controversy around him. He's sixth in the championship right now, so not terrible. Could be a lot better had he not had that mishap, or whatever you want to call it, in the second moto. Anyways, he's 11 points behind Nate Thrasher, so he does have his work cut out for him to even get into the top 5 overall. That being said, it is triple points this weekend, so it's definitely doable, and it would be pretty beneficial for him if he could at least jump into that top 5, so look for Levi to bounce back this weekend. Then right behind him, surprisingly, at least to me, we have his teammate, Ty Masterpool. So Ty has been absolutely killing it. We know that he's really not that big on Supercross, at least from our perspective. He has made the case that he's actually comfortable on Supercross, but he's yet to prove that, especially this year. He came out and got hurt, and we really never saw him again in Supercross. That being said, he's coming through the wild card in every round, and so is Max Anstey, and he's far outperformed Max, who was arguably a favorite to win the Supercross championships in both rounds, and they're both coming off of injuries. Granted, they are separate types of injuries, but either way, Ty's looking really good right now. He was outside of the top 22 in the championship, and now he's all the way up to 7th. So right now, he's only 5 points behind Levi Kitchen, which is pretty crazy considering Levi had some pretty substantial point seeding coming in, and Ty he just doesn't even get good lane choice. He has to go through the wild card round, and yeah, there's a lot of guys coming through the wild card round, so he's getting up to like 15th or 16th gate pick, but that's still not ideal. So it's great to see Ty out here. We're not sure exactly what he's going to be doing as far as the team next year, but look for him to finish off the season strong. He did quietly come away with a 4th place finish last weekend, so that was really good too. But anyways, 8th in the championship is where we find Jordan Smith, and he does seem to be struggling just a little bit. He managed to bring home a 7th last weekend. Really nothing spectacular, nothing to complain about either. So keep an eye on Jordan Smith. He could definitely climb really high in the standings if he excels this weekend, or he could continue to fall. He's actually tied with Ty Masterpool right now. So pretty good battle, as you'll see right in this mid-lower range of the top 10. 9th in the championship, 7 points behind Jordan Smith, is where we find Ryder DeFrancisco. And he actually looked really good at the opening round of the playoffs, and then he kind of struggled last weekend. He was outside the top 10, but we know he has the speed. He just has to back it up. He's lacked that consistency, but he's been injured for the most of the season. I'm curious to see where he goes next year and what he does next year. For right now, he's 9th in the championship, 7 points behind Jordan Smith. And then rounding out your top 10 is where we find Cole Davies. And same thing could kind of be said as far as results last weekend. Nothing too spectacular. He's still doing pretty good. He's actually tied with Ryder DeFrancisco. He's gone 8-11 in the 2 races so far. So he wasn't quite able to bring home a top 10 last weekend. I'm sure he's a little bit bummed on that. But with that being said, it's his rookie season. He's just coming back from an injury. We know he has the speed. We saw the flash in supercross. So don't be surprised if he comes out here and contends for a top 5 overall and plays some sort of spoiler in the championship. It definitely could happen. Remember, he is Hayden Deegan's teammate. That being said, I'm not sure that he's the biggest Hayden Deegan fan, so I'm not expecting him to do any major favors by Hayden, but you never know. Things could get interesting with his speed and the fact that he's Hayden's teammate. The first rider on the outside of the top 10 looking to get into the top 10 is going to be Drew Adams. He's actually finished in 11th and 12th so far in the series, and he's only 4 points behind Cole Davies. He's definitely improved on his seating position, but I'm sure he would like to at least be in the top 10 overall after this weekend. So look for him to keep improving on that. He's going to have to leapfrog ahead of one of these guys, maybe like Jordan Smith or something, and he's going to probably have to have his best result of the playoffs so far to do that. Only 1 point behind Drew Adams is where we pick up his teammate Garrett Marchbanks. And the opposite could be said about him as far as riding up the standings. He's actually falling down. He was your number 3 seed, and now he's all the way back to 12th in the championship. So obviously he is dealing with that knee injury. Thankfully, he was able to tough it out and bring home a 14th place last weekend, which still brought him some points, and that's why he's at least this high up in the standings. If he was able to finish right here in 12th, he would still bring home $13,000 as far as his championship bonus money. I'm sure he would like to at least do that, or maybe a little bit better. Hopefully he's feeling better this weekend. I kind of doubt it. We don't have any significant update as far as the extent of his knee injury. I'm hoping he doesn't need surgery in the offseason. That's really kind of remains to be seen. We're not sure the full extent, like I said, but nonetheless, he's right here. He's only 1 point behind his teammate. And then 1 point behind him, we have Daxton Bennick. I'm not really sure what to say about Daxton Bennick. He's riding pretty good. Not quite as good as Ty Masterpool, but nonetheless, he is coming from the wild card round. So the fact that he was able to bring home an 8th last weekend, and he is at least this high in the standings, is still pretty solid, especially when you consider that Max Anstey is actually tied with him, and they're essentially in a similar position. Daxton Bennick is coming back from a concussion, where Max Anstey is coming back from a broken leg. So both of those guys, Max Anstey and Daxton Bennick, are right here, 13th and 14th in the championship, actually tied with one another. So another little battle to keep an eye on here, with them basically being tied with Daxton Bennick, and really not that far behind Drew Adams either. Pretty tight battle right here as we go through the early teens in the championship, and there is a lot of money on the line. The next closest guy is going to be Austin Faulkner, and obviously he's not competing this weekend as of right now. He's 10 points behind Max Anstey, so pretty big gap from the guys we just talked about all the way back to 15th. The next closest guy in 16th is going to be Dylan Schwartz, and he's actually tied with Faulkner. So as long as he scores some points this weekend, which I'm sure he will leapfrog Austin and likely finish in the top 15 in the championship. So right now, Dylan Schwartz is 16th, 10 points behind Max Anstey. 17th in the championship, 1 point behind Dylan Schwartz is where we find Max Voland. Obviously, he's not going to be competing like we talked about in the injury updates. So the next closest guy in 18th, 6 points behind Max Voland, is going to be Cullen Park. And to see Cullen Park this far back is kind of surprising. We actually have seen him be very successful in Supercross before. He actually got Supercross Rookie of the Year back in his rookie season. So we know he's capable. He's definitely struggled with some injuries these last couple of years and hasn't really looked that great in motocross. So that's definitely part of why he's so far back in the seeding and things like that. But nonetheless, he's only been able to manage 2 16th place finishes so far in this championship. And I would think that he should be able to do a little bit closer to top 15s and maybe mid-teens, something like that. So hopefully he can have a good result this weekend and leapfrog guys like Voland and Schwartz and Faulkner and then get into that top 15 range and get a little bit more money. The next closest guy behind him is going to be Julien Beaumer. He's 19th right now, 3 points behind Cullen Park. Obviously he's not competing, but I still want to talk about him. There's a good chance he'll stay inside the top 22 and still bring home a little bit of money. It's only going to be a few $1,000s. Definitely nothing to really make up for what he's gone through this year. He's had a lot of injuries, a lot of head injuries, and obviously most recently a pretty catastrophic neck injury. Thankfully, he is back on his feet, so that's always great to see. I hate to make this comparison, but the way that he's been going through so many injuries recently kind of reminds me of a Jet Reynolds type of trajectory, but obviously not quite as highly as of a touted amateur. Nonetheless, hopefully Juju heals up and comes out strong next season. The next closest guy behind him is going to be Lux Turner. He's going to round out your top 20. Only 1 point behind Julien Beaumer, so he's pretty much guaranteed to pass him as long as he does get into the motos this weekend. It is still a chance that he does not get that done, but he's managed an 18th and a 17th so far in the first 2 rounds. Look for him to do something similar this weekend and jump as high into the standings as he can. Behind him, we have Parker Ross, and I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed with what we've seen out of Parker Ross so far. He looked really good in Supercross, considering it was his rookie season, and he was a top 10 guy at times in Pro Motocross. So I really kind of expected him to be a lot more solid. He's been relatively healthy throughout the entire season, and he was looking really good in motocross, like I said. So I thought he would at least be a top 15 guy, but so far his best finish in the playoffs has been an 18th, and that's with him being seeded directly into the main events. So he's definitely struggling out there. Not sure if it's something where the Yamaha doesn't quite ride Supercross as well as what his Honda did for him, or if this type of track is just not the same, or maybe he's just not that good at the Supercross type stuff, considering he was riding the divisional Supercross championships. It was essentially half the field. Now we have the whole field. So that could be part of it too. But all that being said, he was a top 10 guy in motocross, so he should be able to get somewhat in there, and he does appear to be struggling. The next 3 guys we're going to talk about are all out of the series, but there's some really important things to talk about. In 22nd, we have Michael Mosiman. He's out of the series. He had that tough crash at the end of Pro Motocross. We're not sure exactly what team he's going to be on next season. I'm sure he would like to return to Star Racing, but we don't know that he's actually signed there. We do know that his deal is up, and we have not heard that he has re-signed with the team. We also know that Bobby Reagan has told him at least twice to go ahead and retire. So things are not looking exceptionally good for Michael Mosiman. He has put in the results this year that would make you think he should be able to get a ride. But that being said, we don't know what's going on. We're going to have to keep an eye on this situation as we head into the offseason. Don't be surprised to see Michael Mosiman on the Quadlock Honda team next year, or maybe he just stays with Star. Moving on to the next guy in 23rd, we have Chance Hymas. Obviously not that big of a deal that he's right here. I don't think he cares about that. But what is worth mentioning is that he is coming back from that ACL, and he did tear in his quote-unquote good knee this time. And he essentially had torn his bad ACL at this time last year, and he was still able to return for the East Coast Supercross Series. So look for Chance to come out swinging in Supercross once again this year. Hopefully he has a little bit more time in the offseason, since he has been able to have that surgery earlier on in the year, and hopefully he'll have a little bit more luck moving forward as far as knee injuries. Then behind him we have Mikkel Harep. Unfortunately, he's not able to compete, but he is back on the bike. So I just want to give a shout out to Mikkel. We've all gotten to know him this year in motocross. Seems like most people really like him. Also, I thought it was worth mentioning that in his most recent Instagram photo, which is what we're looking at right here, we see what appears to be Jordan Smith preparing for what is likely going to be his 450 debut. Anyways, the next closest guy in 25th right now who is still competing is Hunter Yoder. He's 6 points behind Michael Moserman, so he's going to need to get into the motos this weekend and do relatively well to be able to go and get into the top 22 and earn some of that overall payout. Jumping over to the 450 class, at the top this week we have Jet Lawrence, who now has 91 points, even after that absolutely catastrophic moto that he had last weekend where he was 21st off of the start and then he really didn't move forward for the first half of a lap. He was still able to bring his way all the way up to 4th and make his way around guys like Chase Sexton even after that horrendous start and salvaged a 2nd place overall, so he is still atop the points lead right now. That being said, he only has 6 points over his brother Hunter, so he will need to go out there and win this weekend if he wants to make sure that he is guaranteed to win this championship. And so far, he's the only person that has won this SMX title in the 450 class, so you know that he's definitely looking to do that. That being said, he can't afford to be making mistakes like this. This weekend, we've seen a couple of pretty major mistakes out of him in the last couple of months. Kind of uncharacteristic because generally he's really good off the starts and pretty much flawless all throughout the race, even when he is under heavy pressure. That being said, if anybody can do it, he definitely can. I would look for him to probably come out here and dominate. Would not be surprised at all. This is a very fast track this weekend, as you guys are going to see later on in the show. There's some really high speed sections, and while it may be hard to pass, generally speaking, I think this is Jet's kind of track. Second in the championship right now is where we find Hunter Lawrence, and he absolutely killed it in that first moto. He pretty much took off and ran away with it, and he did what he needed to do in the second moto to bring home another overall win. It's really good to see Hunter coming along so strong and, you know, really looking good, even though his brother definitely takes the spotlight away from him most of the time. That being said, he's right there to capitalize whenever there is a mistake, or in some days, he's outright the fastest guy, like we saw in that first moto. Like we said earlier, he's only 6 points behind his brother, so all that he really has to do is come out here and win. Not going to be easy for him to do that, but if he is able to do that, then he will be your champion. He tied with his brother last year. You know he's not going to want to be in a similar circumstance this year. I really doubt he's going to get rough with his brother, but hopefully if he is presented with an opportunity, he'll at least race him as hard as he can. I do want to make one thing clear though, just beating his brother is not going to be good enough. If something really crazy happens and neither one of them win, and say Hunter gets second and Jet gets third, that would actually result in a tie in the points, which would lean in favor of Jet since he has more overall wins this year. Third in the championship right now is where we find Eli Tomac, and he's the last guy on this list who realistically has any kind of chance at this championship. Right now, he's 16 points back of Jet Lawrence, so he's close enough that if he ends up winning, he'll automatically beat Hunter. That's not an issue, but he would still need Jet to finish in 4th overall. Now, obviously, based off of what we saw last weekend, that's highly unlikely to happen, so pretty much he's not really in it. But if something crazy happens to Jet, if Jet DNFs or something like that, then this is definitely on the table. Not wishing that on Jet by any means. I'm just giving you guys the information as far as where Tomac is at in the point standings. Last weekend, he did look pretty good, but it was interesting to see that he couldn't quite get around these guys, even though he was right on him. But in the second moto, he was looking really good. He had the speed to run with Jet, so if he can get a little bit better start, maybe things are a little bit different this week. Fourth in the championship right now is where we find Chase Sexton. He's 7 points behind Eli Tomac, so definitely within striking distance of at least 3rd overall. but other than that, it's going to be tough. I'm not really sure what to say about what we saw last weekend. There was a lot going on. He looked pretty solid in the first moto until Jet Lawrence caught and passed him and dropped him, but that's Jet. So anyways, it's hard to say. He was running in 4th in the second moto, seemed to be doing fine, that is, until the last lap, where he ran his lap 19 seconds slower than the lap before and dropped from 4th to 10th. And Chase didn't have a whole lot to say about it at the time. Really, this is all that we got. This is his Instagram post here. So he said, not much to say about St. Louis, and to be honest, I'm quite disappointed. Just want to apologize to the fans and to the people who support me. It's been a trying year, but it hasn't been from a lack of effort from me and the people in my corner. See y'all in Vegas. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I feel like he's trying to stay within the boundaries of his contract. He obviously can't have too much defamation of KTM going on. He's not going to just come out there and say that there's a huge issue with the bike. There had to be something for him to drop from 4th to 10th in one lap at the last lap. That's definitely not normal. We know that he could probably ride a flat tire or anything like that, at least for a top 5 or maybe 6th or 7th. So kind of weird. And then this is also really weird right here. This is his post from earlier on in the week. He's out here shredding a 125. So things that I was not expecting to see this week. This is at the top of the list. Chase Sexton shredding a 125 on probably his last week or two where he's going to be riding for KTM. Well, I guess he's still doing Motocross the Nations, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later on. 5th in the championship right now is where we find Cooper Webb. He's only 1 point behind Chase Sexton right now, so he's right there. He also was able to manage the top 5 last weekend, like we predicted in this exact show last weekend. That being said, I do think he's going to have a hard time replicating that this weekend, considering Chase Sexton, Justin Cooper, and RJ Hampshire were all outside of the top 5, and they've all been guys who we've seen beat him in this type of format before. 6th in the championship right now is where we pick up Justin Cooper. He was your number 1 seed coming into the season, and so far he's really struggled. He struggled once again last weekend. I definitely expected him to do pretty good. We've seen him be the fastest qualifier in Supercross before, and he was really good in motocross as well. So the fact that the speed was there, and the biggest thing that he struggles with in Supercross, which is whoops, was not at this race. I had a lot higher expectations for him than what we saw. So hopefully he can bounce back this weekend and at least salvage some more points, because if not, he's going to continue dropping down the standings. 7th in the championship, only 1 point behind Justin Cooper, is where we pick up Ken Roczen, and he's kind of doing the opposite of what Justin Cooper is doing. He's obviously rising up the standings after missing some Supercross as well as pretty much all of the motocross races. So it's great to see Ken back out here. He's averaging a 5th place finish in these SMX rounds. He's gotten a 4th and a 6th. That being said, he's always up for a good time as well. This is him on Friday, getting a little loose. Luckily, it looks like he's all good. So anyways, Ken Roczen right here, 7th in the standings. 8th in the standings right now is where we pick RJ Hampshire. He's only 2 points behind Ken Roczen, but he's only 7 points behind Chase Sexton in 4th. So all of these guys, 4th through 8th, they're kind of in a tight little pack, and there's a huge gap behind RJ. So realistically, these guys are all going to fight to settle in for the top 8. It's really going to depend on what position they finish in this weekend, and whoever finishes better is probably going to be in that spot. The next closest guy after RJ Hampshire is going to be Dylan Ferrandis, and like his number, he is 14 points behind RJ. So while he could technically catch maybe 1 or maybe 2 of these guys if they have massive issues during the race, likely Dylan has reached his ceiling, but that's still a really good ceiling. He was pretty far back. He was 18th. Well, he would have been 18th if he didn't come back for motocross. So the fact that he came back, did a couple of motocross races, and then now he's doing very well in SMX. He's jumped all the way up to 9th. So far, he's had a 8th and a 10th place finishes in the first 2 rounds. Look for him to be right around the top 10 again. And like I said in this show before, there's a nice little rivalry going between him and Justin Barcia, because they're likely going to be teammates on Ducati next year. And so far, Dylan's coming out on top both in Pro Motocross and in SMX. Rounding out your top 10, we have Joey Savatgy. He's only 1 point behind Dylan Ferrandis. He was seeded a little bit better, I believe, coming into the season, and he's also gone 9-9 in both of the main events. So right around the same as Dylan Ferrandis. Luckily, at the double points round, he did beat Dylan, so that's where he's been able to make up a little bit of points. Good little battle between these two guys. And then the next closest guy right behind him is going to be Justin Barcia. He's also right there. Like I said, he's in a pretty good battle with Dylan Ferrandis, and they've been finishing in similar positions, but generally speaking, he's always right behind Dylan Ferrandis. Right now, Justin is tied with Joey Savatgy, but he is also trending in the wrong direction. He's gone 10-11 in the first 2 rounds so far, and that's how he is right here in 11th in the standings. That being said, he is in the last spot that really pays out well. Looking at the payout right here, as you guys can see, 11th in the championship gets $50,000, and then there's a $15,000 jump back to 12th, and then it only drops $1,000 for each position from there. So going from 12th to 11th is a massive bump, and dropping from 11th to 12th is a massive drop. Hopefully, for Justin's sake, he can at least hold on to this 11th place position, which I do expect him to be able to do. And the main reason I say that is because the next closest guy is Benny Bloss. And that's nothing against Benny Bloss. He is coming from the wildcard races, and he's gotten a couple of 12th place finishes, which is not that far off from Justin Barcia. That being said, he is 17 points behind Justin Barcia. So Barcia would pretty much have to DNF the race to get passed by Benny, and that's mainly because Barcia had way more seeding points coming in. Anyways, shout out to Benny Bloss for being the highest unseeded rider in this championship point standings. He's pretty much maxed himself out as far as being right here in the championship, and he's still going to get a good little payday, so I'm sure he's stoked about that. Another guy who's probably pretty happy with where he's at is Valentin Guillot. He's right here, 13th in the championship. He's managed to go 14-14 in the motos, and with the seeding points that he was able to get from qualifying directly into the main events, he's only 2 points behind Benny Bloss, so definitely still within striking distance of making another $1,000. But that's probably neither here nor there at this point. He's getting a nice chunk of change. The question for him is, what is he going to do next year? I would be really curious to see if he can return for a full season. That being said, I'm sure getting through a full Supercross season would be pretty tough for him. We usually only see 2 or 3 guys that can make it a full season healthy, and I doubt he would be one of them. But anyways, hopefully we have him back next year. And so far, it's been a great end to the season for him. And I'm sure he's just going to come out here and finish strong. In 14th, only 2 points behind Valentin Guillot, is where we pick up Justin Hill. And I'm kind of surprised that Valentin Guillot is ahead of him right now. I would expect Justin Hill, especially last weekend, to outperform Valentin Guillot. That being said, he did bring home a 15th last weekend and a 13th at the first round. So he does appear to be struggling at least a little bit when compared to his Supercross results earlier on this year. Hopefully he can finish strong, and I'm curious to see what he is going to do next. In 15th is where we find Cody Schock. He's 4 points behind Justin Hill, and he should be much higher. He probably should have been directly into the main events, where he could have had much better gate choice, and he is a very good starter, so he really could have benefited from that. He's suffered from crashes in both of the rounds. That crash that you saw at the very start of this video was Cody crashing in the first main event, I believe. So the fact that he's still able to be this high in the standings after having 2 pretty rough rounds is very remarkable. I'm curious to see if next year he decides to race 450 Supercross or not. He did race 450 Supercross at Daytona on a 250, where he was able to do pretty well, and it seems like the 450 is suiting him good. We saw the results in motocross, and I know that a goal of his is to get a career number, and the only way he's going to be able to do that is sticking on the 450 all season long. And even then, it'll still be tough, but at least he would have a shot at it. So anyways, curious what next year looks like for Cody. In 16th, only 1 point behind Cody, is where we have Shane McElrath, and I could say the same thing about him that we said about Justin Hill. He's kind of struggled compared to his Supercross results earlier on in the year. That being said, he did come back for motocross, where he also struggled, so this isn't a total shock, and we've seen some really hot and cold performances from Shane in the past. He's almost won 250 Supercross championships, he's won Supercross championships overseas, and he's also really struggled to be inside the top 15 at times. So anyways, Shane's right here. 17th in the points, only 1 point behind Shane McElrath, is where we pick up Malcolm Stewart. And remember, he has not competed in any of the rounds so far, But like we talked about in the injury updates, it is believed he's going to give it a go this weekend. So stay tuned for that. Right now, even with him being in 17th, he's still set up to take home around $30,000. And for every position he can move forward, that's another $1,000. And if he can somehow leapfrog all the way up to 11th, which is highly unlikely, then he would obviously take that leap all the way up into around the 50 grand range. So we've seen Malcolm do really well in the past. I don't expect that to happen. But anyways, this is where Malcolm is at. 18th in the championship, 6 points behind Malcolm Stewart is where we find Mitchell Harrison. And I want to go ahead and take some time to talk a little bit more in depth about Mitchell Harrison. This is something that I really like to do on this channel, is highlight the stories that don't get talked about enough in our sport, and I feel like Mitchell is one of them. If you guys don't already know or didn't remember, Mitchell is one of those guys who was chewed up and spit out of the pro circuit team early on in his career. He had a shot, he missed his shot, and he's just kind of fell off the face of the earth since then. So to kind of oversimplify this and summarize this quickly, this was back in 2020, and then essentially he kind of fell off ever since then. He did go up to Canada and see some success in 2022, and he's bounced around and he's never stopped racing, but his trajectory has not been that great. And this year he's been able to race all throughout Supercross. He wasn't really doing a whole lot that you would notice, but he was in there making mains, scoring points, and he's really turned a corner at the end of motocross. Remember, back at the start of the motocross season, he didn't even score any points at the opening round at Fox Raceway, and he was in the top 10 multiple times by the end of the motocross season. So shout out to Mitchell Harrison. It's awesome to see that. 19th in the championship, tied with Mitchell Harrison, is where we pick up Aaron Plessinger. Shout out to Aaron Plessinger. I hope that he gets everything figured out this offseason. Whether or not he's able to take home some money this weekend by not lining up at all is probably going to fall on the shoulders of Kyle Chisholm. We'll get a little bit more into that. But anyways, right now this is where Aaron Plessinger is at. 20th is where we pick up Marshall Welton. He's only a couple points back behind Aaron Plessinger and Mitchell Harrison, and that is strictly because of his performance last weekend. He did not qualify into the motos at the opening round, but then he bounced back really strong last weekend in St. Louis with a 16th, and the fact that the double points were there, that really paid off for him. So now he's leapfrogged himself well inside the points paying position, or I'm sorry, the money paying positions in the points. So he'll likely be able to bring home at least $25,000 this weekend. 1 point behind Marshall Welton, we have the factory beta rider of Mitchell Oldenburg, and he made me look pretty smart. Last weekend in this very show, I predicted that he would win the wildcard race, and he went out and did just that. And then he backed it up with the 19th place finish in the main event, well, in the overall. So unfortunately for Mitchell Oldenburg, he does seem to have the speed at times. He qualifies pretty well, but he hasn't quite been able to put it together in both motos. And even though he's made both of the motos, or I'm sorry, all of the motos at both races, he is struggling a bit in the points, especially with that 19th last weekend. We see how even somebody like Marshall Welton could come in and only make one of the races, and he's already leapfrogged ahead of him. So look for Mitchell to try to bounce back this weekend. He's definitely a top 15 guy on his best days. He has the same speed on paper as his teammate Benny Bloss, who's been finishing around 12th. In 22nd, 2 points behind Oldenburg in the final payout position, we have Jorge Prado, and likely he's not going to be able to keep this, so he's pretty much not going to get paid anything from SMX, which at this point, it doesn't really feel like he deserves to get paid. But anyways, I just have to mention he's right here. Right behind him, we have another foreign rider that I think we can all agree that we all want to see get paid. He's only 1 point behind him, so all he has to do is make the show this weekend and get 21st, and he will at least jump ahead of Jorge Prado, which should secure him at least $25,000. So shout out to Dino. He's out here racing pretty banged up after taking a fall last weekend and re-injuring his already demolished knee. So say a prayer for Dino, like I said in the injury updates. But anyways, right now he's 23rd, 1 point back. In 24th, we have Jason Anderson. And then in 25th, we have Colton Nichols. Like we said in the injury updates, both of those guys are going to be out. So the next closest guy is going to be Kyle Chisholm. So looking at Kyle, he's in a pretty interesting spot. He's 4 points behind Dean Wilson, so I do think he's going to have a hard time catching and passing Dino, assuming that they're both in the motos, which remember Kyle did not make the motos at the opening round, but he was able to do that last weekend, which is why he's this high in the standings. He's also 7 points behind Mitchell Oldenburg. So assuming that he does get enough points to leapfrog ahead of Jorge Prado, he's going to either need to pass Dean Wilson or Mitchell Oldenburg or Aaron Plessinger, who's only 1 point ahead of Oldenburg. So long story short, if Kyle can get in the main and at least score 8 points this weekend, he will cash himself at least a $25,000 check. That could be a little bit tough because that would be essentially a 19th overall. So he's definitely capable of that. He made the motos last weekend. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what he can do. But if nothing else, he could at least jump up there and knock Jorge Prado out. Jumping over to our weather and schedule, all times that you see right here are going to be in local time. So if you're on the East Coast, just add 3 hours to it. Anyways, qualifying is going to kick off at 1:20 local time. Then Race Day Live itself is going to kick off right in time for this. It should be kicking off right at 1:30. So 5 minutes before the 250 seated qualifying. And it is actually going to go all the way through all of these qualifyings. As you can see, we're doing KTM Junior this weekend instead of the SMX Next class. We're going to have 2 rounds of qualifying. And then right here is going to be probably the most exciting part. It would be a lot more exciting if there was more on the line, but most of these guys are going to transfer. And this will be on Race Day Live as well. Then as far as the actual night show itself, that's going to kick off essentially at 7 o'clock. You could see right here, this is when 250 Moto 1 actually starts. So look forward to that. Jumping over to the weather, things are a lot hotter than what we've had to deal with so far. So during qualifying, it's going to be not too bad at the start. It's going to get really hot. If you guys look at that white line on the graph, that is supposedly what it's going to feel like. So right in the middle of qualifying, it's going to be darn near feeling like 100 degrees. These guys are going to be absolutely baking in the sun. Then come race time, it is going to cool off nicely. It's going to drop into the high 80s, which is still pretty hot, but the fact that the sun will be essentially down, it's going to feel not nearly as bad. So definitely a little bit better, but it's going to be really hot, so keep an eye out for that. Next, I want to highlight something for you guys here, and that is what we saw at press day. So a pretty interesting start here. We have a bit of a drop going out of the starting gate into 2 more little rollers. It looks like those are probably because they're going perpendicular to the drag strip, so they have to go over the drag walls. I'm not a big fan of the drag strips because of the walls, but I am pretty interested on how the start works out. I think it's kind of cool, at least as a gimmick. So that's something to keep an eye on. All right, another thing that I want to point out to you guys here is Hayden as he comes up and over this bridge. They're actually ending up kind of launching all the way over this bridge and going to backside here where he is right now. I didn't see a whole lot of the 250 guys doing that in the first practice, but most of the 450 guys were doing it, and I do expect anybody who is going for it to essentially be doing it. And then the next thing I want to highlight is right after that, they're going to come into this little dip over this hump and into one of the only bowl turns on the track. And this could be a really awesome passing point. The only problem I think is that you're going to be coming down this hill with a lot of speed, and the way you would usually block pass into a bowl turn is by leaving the braking late and then checking the guy up the turn. And that's going to be hard to do when your back wheel's not even on the ground because of this little bump. So ideally, there would be more passing places on this track, and I think this could have been one of them, but all that is to say, I don't expect this to be a great passing place either. Moving a little bit further down the track, you can see Hayden coming over this pretty big step down right here, and he's going to hang a left on this 90-degree corner, and this little section is like the closest thing that we have to a rhythm section on the track. You come out of this 90-degree corner, which is another place that's not going to be able to be passed on, and then you can either jump on off these tables, you can triple onto the second table and jump off. I saw a few guys doing that, or you can do something similar to what Hayden's doing here and actually quad all the way over the tables. Saw a few people doing that as well. But really, not a lot of supercross going on here, other than the fact that it's a relatively flat track, no major elevation changes. All that being said, it is a pretty cool track design. It looks fun, but again, I do think there's going to be not a lot of passing going on. Another pretty cool thing that we got to see at press day was the preview of what the Team USA bikes are going to look like, and kind of just see the guys, you know, representing that. So interestingly enough, because Chase Sexton is the team captain and Team USA had got second last year, Chase Sexton is going to be running the same number 4, which he always runs. And really, if you look at his bike, it kind of just looks like his Redbud bike, but with the number 4 on it. But nonetheless, looking pretty good. Jumping over to Eli Tomac's bike, he's obviously going to be in the open class or MX3, whatever you prefer. He will be your number 6, looking good as well. And then Hayden, he is in MX2, so he will have the number 5. We saw all these guys riding around on Friday press day, practice, whatever you want to call it, and riding these bikes. So that was cool to see, kind of refreshing to see something a little bit different, and a reminder of what is coming up next at the Motocross of Nations. Alright, so I did just find that Vital had some pretty good coverage of that that bridge jump to the backside here of the 250 guys. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. While that's playing, I just wanted to say that I know if you guys have been around this channel for a while, this race day updates is a lot different than what you're probably used to, and I'm sure it was kind of weird. It was weird for me too, but I appreciate you guys sticking around this long. If you have, this is the other step down right here. So some pretty gnarly jumps this weekend. Anyways, all of that being said, I appreciate you guys' support on the channel. We did manage to hit 10K. That was a really cool milestone, and with that, I want to continue to improve the type of content that I can bring to you guys. And while there might be some growing pains, this is the next step in my production. I want to start doing more live streams and things like that, and this type of software really helps with that. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.